Hello and welcome to another video in WinBidPro version 16 by GDS Estimating. I think this will be a two-part deal where the first part here we're going to talk about glass stops. So we do have a glass stops slash adapters tab in the drawing window, and the stops apply to basically any opening, any daylight opening. And the adapters in this case apply to operable windows. So we'll do a separate video on the adapters for operable windows. So for stops, the first thing we're going to do is check our framing system. So let's go back to elevations and edit framing system. Now we've got a separate tab inside this window, and we might change this to make it a little more recognizable, like stop op-win options or something like that. But basically, it's this last tab, and we're going to cover the stops portion of it. So I'm going to click on that. Now I've already created one stop, and let's actually delete that so we can start over. So when you get into this this window, we can actually delete this one too. So if you haven't done anything yet, it's going to look like this. Basically, there's no stops, no operable window adapters, and no stop options. So the first thing we need to do, and glass stops is basically an applied stop to your, let's only do current elevation. So, your standard framing system is a captured system where the glass sits inside the frame, there's a glass pocket, and it's glazed that way. But if for some reason your framing system has applied stops to the inside of that daylight opening, it's basically an added stop. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So I know that there's glass stops that snap into open back systems and things like that, but in this case it's an applied stop to the interior daylight opening of a or inside of the daylight opening of a framing system opening. So let's get back to the framing system and then go back to our stops operable window tab. And the first thing we need to do is actually add an option. So I'm going to click this add new option down here. And we can actually edit this and change it. So I'm just going to call it applied stop. Oops. So I'm going to name this. The reason for this is we can have multiples. We can have a different stop for the left and right, a different stop for verticals versus horizontals, or we can have the same stop material on all four sides. So in that case, we're selecting here all four sides. I'm going to do glass stops and not the operable window adapters. And then the next step is to actually add the profile and configuration, kind of the assembly we call it, for the stop material. So this is where I'm going to tell it it's a 3/4 inch profile, and then I can browse the list down here to search for, let's see if we can find glazing stop. And we'll just call it this just to pick a part number. So we've created like the assembly or the component properties, the profile and the part numbers that makes up the actual physical stop material. And then we've created the option for it that defines what it is and where it goes, like all four sides. Now, I can say that I want it to be applied to every daylight opening in whatever elevation I'm working with, or I can say I'm going to basically apply it with the tab down in the drawing window where those stops need to go, like what daylight openings they need to go in. Oh, another option here is we can say whether we want the verticals to be continuous and the horizontals are interrupted, or we want the horizontals continuous and the verticals are interrupted. So we just basically click on one or the other option here for that. And you'll see when we go to the drawing how it's visible in the drawing. So we can go to our stops adapters tab, And this is where we're going to actually add it. Now, if I didn't do that, so let's just go do it both ways here. We're going to go back to the framing system, back to here, and then I'm going to say apply as a default to all lights. So that, as I mentioned, means every daylight opening, without even having to apply them separately, is going to get glass stops. So in my case, I have glass stops set as the color yellow, and if you remember, you can go to settings, layer settings, and here under stops, I've got the yellow color. So I could always pick whatever color I want that's, whatever I feel like for stops. But you'll notice that our standard framing material is white, and then our glass stops are yellow. So the glass bite for the glass is now that of the stop. So the glass is actually going into the stop or behind the stop and getting captured by the stops. And you see here's where they're continuous horizontal interrupted by, or interrupting the vertical stops. So, and I could have switched that if I wanted. So that's all lights. Now if I want to go back to the other option and uncheck that, I don't want them in all lights, then this is where we go back to the, you'll notice they're gone now, no yellow lines. We go back to the drawing window, we go to stops, adapters, and I've got my applied stops here. If I have multiple options, I can actually add a different one. Like if there were multiple here, I could click on it and say save, and then it would add it to my list here. That way I can pick different configurations and apply them to different daylight openings. But in my case, let's say I want to do it by row, and I'm going to click the stop that I want to apply, and maybe on this top row I'm going to apply the stops. So you'll notice applied stop shows up now, and this is a little different than regular adapters under glazing options. There's separate videos for that, because those you actually have to assign glass. But for glass stops, it doesn't need to know what the glass thickness is, it just needs to know what your stop parts are and how they're configured. So that's the label that we basically adjusted, and it shows up on the drawing. And I believe there's a way to not show that in the drawing settings as well. But basically that's how we are adding stops to specific rows or daylights and things like that. So again, I could have gone back here, added another stop, and let's just leave it at option 2, and we can say horizontals and verticals. In this one I could say, so stop 1 is referring to whatever actual physical stops we've configured. I can add a new one. Let's say I want a 1-inch stop, and it's going to be called stop 2, and I want that to be on just the left and right. So I could even configure 2 different stops for the top and bottom, left and right, one stop, and on top and bottom a different stop, or I can just leave it at one or the other, and then I can save that. And of course, if we're doing vertical stops, let's say it should draw them continuous since there's nothing else there, but I'm going to hit vertical as continuous just for fun. So now we go back to our stops tab. I'm going to click on option 2, and I'm going to go by light, and I should be able to click on the different lights that I want them on, and it shows us our option 2 label. And then also, let's go back to a different tab here, and we'll notice that all I have is vertical stops now. So my horizontals are standard framing, and then my stops have been added to the verticals in these openings that I clicked on. So really I have all the different ways to configure where the stops go, what stops are used, and how they're applied here in the drawing window. So pretty unlimited functionality here for glass stops. So that's why we went ahead and created a whole separate options thing in the framing system, and then we have our our tab here in the drawing window to apply them any way you like. So that is glass stops. Thank you.